tube strikes. It's quite an impressive turnout despite all that, so well done and thank you as well. And we obviously slightly delayed this meeting so we could celebrate armed forces, sorry, not armed forces, emergency services flag raising in Guildhall Yard. I'd also like to thank members who braved the terrible weather and went to the site visits last week, which I couldn't make, but I understand you were real troopers, so well done. And also to those of you who were able to join the first of our new rolling programme of member training, which was on accessibility and inclusion. You will see the titles and the invites for further training coming into your diaries in months ahead, so do participate if you can. Okay, we're now going to kick the meeting off. It's actually quite a short agenda. Just so you know, if we run short, we still have to wait until 10:30 to start the application subcommittee. But if we run over, we will just commence PASC as soon as we finish this. Item 1 then, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. I have received apologies from Anthony David Fitzpatrick, Tim McNally and Alderwoman Newman. Thank you, Chair.
Very good. I'm not aware of any of the apologies. Deputy Chairman, no? Okay. Item 2, does anyone have any declarations under the Code of Conduct they need to make? Marianne.
It's just to point out that,
can we make sure Marianne's mic is on?
Sorry. It's just for the record, in non-public, there's an item, the car park's in my ward and I use the car park, but I don't believe I have any pecuniary interest.
Very good, thank you. No belt and braces, why not? Thanks, Marianne. So on to our first substantive item, item 3, the City Fund Highway Declaration, which is a report of the City Surveyor for approval. Perhaps this can be introduced.
Yes, good morning.
Could you come forward to the mic, please?
Hello. Thank you. So this item concerns 60 Queen Victoria Street, which is an existing 9-storey building about 300 feet west of Bank Station. The owner has planning approval to refurbish the building and is due to start later this year. The refurbishment involves the use at ground and first floor only. This results in a small encroachment of City Fund highway land, which is about 187 square feet and about 1.3 metres in depth. The land is not part of the adopted public highway, and therefore members are asked to declare this parcel surplus to highway requirements to facilitate its disposal on terms to be approved under the City Surveyor's delegated authority. I did plan to have some images up on the screen there, but they're not showing right now. But if anyone would like to see some plans, I have them here.
Very good. We've got something on the screen, but it's not your presentation. Ah, is it after this on the, if they click through? Okay. Do we know if the slides are available, whoever put the pack together?
I can send them through again.
Well, it may be that I mean, so those of us with laptops and iPads can probably find them. Is this something we'd like to see the slides, or can we? Ah, no.
No, not that one.
I think we might be able to manage without. I don't think this is a contentious item. Tana Atkin.
I'm sorry, it is contentious.
Ah, very good. Okay.
Mic working.
Sorry, that was my famous last words, wasn't it?
What about the mic?
Have you got access online?
I have. Yes,
okay.
I have. I just wanted to ask, when that building was designed, and obviously it's a refit, the design with the entrance at that corner was to allow, obviously, people to walk on that corner to give the feeling of space, because obviously otherwise the building comes right up to the end of the pavement. Firstly, has that been taken into account? And secondly, the number of members of the public that actually use that pathway where it widens and they go through under those columns, has that been looked at? Because essentially public using that part of the pavement, it's public access, it gives a wider public access, and has that been considered when thought's been given to handing it over effectively?
Okay, so the city surveyors were not involved in, giving the planning consent on that, and so we were not the ones authorising that permission, looking into all of that. We have just looked at it from the point of view of regularising an encroachment onto city highway land. So if there are any members of the planning team that can answer that. I would defer to
It's
them.
just when I looked at the plans originally, the first picture you see
Mm.
is of members of the public walking on that bit of land.
Yeah, and a large portion of it is still available for the public to walk through. It's 1.34 metres and a revolving door, so there will still be access there. Whether it's enough or not, or it has a knock-on, is out of my remit.
All right, thank you very much for answering that question.
Thanks for asking. Any more questions? Okay, I think we can proceed to a vote. Are we happy to approve this? I'm going to ask for hands. Thank you very much. That is approved. City there. Thank you very much. Okay, item 4. While we're in public session, I'm moving on to questions, and we have received notification from Alderman Alison Gowman of a question. It's fairly lengthy, so it's up to you how you kind of present it.
Yes, I apologise. It is a bit lengthy. It was to either give sort of some background to the question, because it's about the use of the docks and piers in the river for use by city freight. It's a useful resource, obviously, to have freight coming in through the piers and docks on the river, where I think we're all keen to reuse the river, and that is indeed in part of our city strategy. And in my written question to you, I set out the city transport strategy, which referred to increasing the River Thames for freight, etc., and exploring the use of Blackfriars Tower piers and the reinstated Swan Lane pier, which is actually in my ward at the boundary with Bridge Without by Fishmongers Hall, people who don't perhaps know quite where it is. Now, although obviously the City 2040 plan isn't yet agreed, those are the aspirations. The context of that, and also aware that later on today we're going to be having 2 applications at PASC about river frontages. My 2 questions are, Port London Authority has a net zero vision for the Thames, driving towards electric only vessels, but the city is lacking any electric infrastructure to which they could connect. An issue that saw there was an application for a boat called Ocean Diva, which was electric, to be actually moored at Swan Lane, wasn't approved. There was no electric links there, and it was disagreed for other reasons. But I just feel that we do need to have capacity at these piers and wharfs in order to have electric boats moored and charged there, and that will enable more traffic, but also particularly river freight. So what steps are we taking to build this capacity, as well as the related grid capacity? The second point is about how complicated oversight of the river is, which I've discovered in looking at matters around Swan Lane. It's split between different organisations, the PLA, the Maritime Coastal Organisation, etc., and even within the corporation there are different committees and different departments that deal with the river and with planning, obviously, but with the wharfs, with the foreshore, etc. I really wondered, particularly we've got the example of the Bazalgette Pier this afternoon that's being reopened at part of the super sewer. It's not quite clear who has oversight entirely of that. So I wonder whether or not we should actually, as a corporation at least, have some kind of cohesive purpose to that oversight, whether we set up some kind of panel or an informal working group that may already exist between officers. I'm not aware of anything between members, so that we can actually ensure what we are doing on the river is as purposeful, useful and as coordinated as it can be. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Alderman Gowman. Now, there are 2 parts to that question. I think one is transportation, and one would be from planning officers. Perhaps Ian Hughes, you want to take the first part.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Alderman, for notice of the question. I'm just going to say a few words about what we're doing in the transport strategy context around discussions around light freight, a little bit about charging facilities, although it's in its infancy, and I'll also say a little bit about the work we've done looking at Walbrook Wharf specifically. And it's been a big piece of work we've been doing, not relation to this committee, but for Port Health and to Resource Allocation Subcommittee. Then I'll hand over to my planning colleagues who will talk a little bit about development on the riverside and the piers. So we are the key thing for us is that we're part of the Thames Estuary Growth Board, and that's one of these groups that does try and address this question about this diverse interests that relate to the river. And as I'm sure members appreciate, the key people at the moment who are using the river are Thames Clippers. So we have a very strong working relationship with them, and we are looking with them at what opportunities they would like to develop for light freight coming into the square mile. Now, they are looking already at the use of things like cargo bikes, and they already have use and agreed use with Transport for London for use of the piers on the south side of the Thames, to use those as places where they can land light freight through those piers. They are interested in doing the same on the north side of the river, and that's something that we would encourage, and we were very happy to continue that dialogue between Thames Clipper and with TfL, and they're working with people like TfL, also working with people like DHL. So there is an appetite for that we think can be translated to our side of the river. The question about charging facilities is a bit of a tricky one, because as the Alderman implied, there's not just a question of where you bring it in, but there's also the question of capacity from a power point of view. We want to take that forward. Thames Clipper are wanting to talk about that. We've asked for them for some more information to continue and grow that dialogue. We're still waiting for that information. We have a meeting lined up soon to progress that. And then we have, I would say though, that we do have a joined up position around this internally, so as officers are concerned, between environment and particularly city surveyors as well. And they're looking at what other opportunities there might be along the riverside, a whole raft of things at the minute. So once we've got that further information about the kind of requirements that they might need, then we can progress that forward. In terms of Walbrook Wharf, quite often members have said, can we look to use Walbrook Wharf and do more with it? So as part of a piece of work about looking at the future of Walbrook Wharf, between environment and city surveyors, we did an in-depth feasibility study that was reported back to Port Health and Environmental Services Committee and Resource Allocation Sub about 3 months ago. And that looked at the future of Walbrook in the medium term, and could it be considered for things like river freight amongst the continuing operation for cleansing. It found a number of challenges currently. I say the market is still not mature enough to really progress the idea of expanding river freight in a consistent and a broad way to then generate the returns to effectively make it economically viable to develop some of these opportunities. Particularly at Walbrook, the space is at a premium, so actually trying to find a way to squeeze in additional facilities coming and going through that facility is really challenging. The key thing is that Walbrook is tidal. And so actually what happens at the moment with the cleansing operation is the barges come and they ground out when the tide goes out. That's fine for cleansing. It's not so good if you actually want to have a 24/7 delivery function delivering freight. So the only way to make Walbrook a feasible facility for 24/7 deliveries for freight is you would have to build a pier out into the Thames, with all the costs and the implications that would have on the river traffic and biodiversity and everything else. It could be done, but it just added to the complexity for the here and now. And the final point about that feasibility study is that the industry wasn't prepared to help fund it. In terms of development of Walbrook, the funding isn't there, and the corporation's not in a position at the moment to fund that level of expense. So for Walbrook, we've said for the time being, we will continue with the cleansing function as the primary need, but we're not ruling it out. What we are saying in terms of operational property is we're going to review Walbrook in about 5 years' time for various other reasons, but that will also include a refresh of what the opportunities might be for freight potentially coming through Walbrook by 2030, that kind of timescale. So we have the transport strategy, we're doing that engagement with some of the key operators, and when the opportunities arise, we're doing that in-depth piece of work to see whether there are things that we can do in the medium term. I think that also applies to planning. I'll hand over to my planning colleagues about the other developments. Chair.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the Alderman for the question as well. Just on the planning front, we do have relevant policies in the city plan covering the whole of the river area, as well as more specific key areas of change policies covering the Pool of London and the Blackfriars area, all of which encourage the use of the river for freight purposes. Members will be aware that we're developing a supplementary planning document for the Puddle Dock area, which factors in those policies and which will be coming back to this committee in a draft form prior to consultation. And we're working on a planning advice note, which we're intending to bring to this committee next month, reflecting the potential to use sites along the river for barges that can bring low carbon heat into the city, effectively a form of freight, and that could act as a significant part of the infrastructure necessary to deliver low carbon heat networks in the square mile. So all of those policies will be considered as part of determining relevant planning applications as they come forward to this committee as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian and Rob. Alison, do you have a follow-up?
I don't have a supplement. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for those. Marianne.
Can I just, one, we're on the river. Would it be possible at some point, and I'm not sure if it's this committee, because Alison points out it's very convoluted across the corporation with Port Health, to have a report on the grab chains and life belts that we have along the riverside? A few years ago, we put extra life belts in along by the oyster shed because it's incredibly busy as in the evenings along there with people sitting on the river wall. But I just wonder, should we be doing an audit to ensure that we have enough life-saving equipment and grab rails and what else we can do as well? And on another side of it, we have plastic-free city, and again, this is licensing, but the way we design our river walls encourage people actually to sit on them and sit on them with glasses, plastic glasses, bottles, which ultimately end up in the river. So I think going forward in the future, when we're looking at designing river walls and raising river walls, we need to ensure that we design in or design out and mitigate those kind of issues. You know, people be able to climb up on them and leave things on that got blown into the river. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it was a question specifically on the audit of the life-saving provision.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. We actually have done one of those quite recently in terms of audits of life-saving equipment, and that was in conjunction with colleagues from the City Bridge Foundation, which actually led to some additional life belts going in on Tower Bridge. Members are aware of the issues around people in the river around Tower Bridge and London Bridge. So that piece of work has been done actually relatively recently and resulted in some additional equipment. In terms of the riverside, we expanded that, so we did look at the maintenance and support of the kit that we do have there. They're regularly inspected, and so at this point we are relatively comfortable in terms of what we have out there, principally because we've done actually something quite recently in terms of refreshing whether it's sufficient. And we continue to engage with people like the RNLI and the Samaritans around what we have available and is it sufficient. In terms of the riverside wall and the items that are left there, it's an interesting point. I'll pick up again with cleansing. We have Clean City process and Clean City Awards, plastic-free city, just to engage with, make sure we're engaging with the bars and restaurants along the riverside to consider those sorts of issues. I know the district surveyor has long-term plan for the riverside in relation to the need to review the height of the river wall in a longer term sense because of the flood defences, are they sufficient, all those sorts of issues. So it's an interesting point. We can raise that with district surveyor. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thanks for the question, Marianne. Thanks, Ian, for the answer. Okay, there are no other questions. I've got no other business. Are we content to exclude the public? Very good. Thank you. Are there any public? I think that might mean we just turn off the YouTube link. When you're ready.